Apartment 601 has been quiet for 4 months. Its door is sealed. Its windows are dark. The hallway outside smells faintly of disinfectant, as if someone believed cleanliness could substitute for memory. According to official records, no one has lived there since the night Yu Menglong fell to his death. The apartment is classified as unoccupied, empty, inactive, forgotten, and yet the water kept running. A single utility bill, briefly visible before being removed, recorded an impossible detail. Over the course of 2 months, 20 cubic meters of water were consumed inside that supposedly empty space. 20 tons. Not a drip, not a leak. A volume consistent with daily human use, with washing, with repetition, with intention. In a city where every number is monitored and every anomaly scrutinized, this one figure slipped through quietly. No press release followed. No explanation was offered. The door remained locked. Guards continued to stand watch. The building stayed sealed, not as a place of mourning, but as a place of containment. The question was never officially asked, but it echoed anyway. What requires 20 tons of water in an empty apartment? Outside the complex, traces of grief were treated as threats. Flowers placed by admirers were removed within hours. Candles were extinguished. Notes disappeared. Even the most basic rituals of remembrance were erased, as if memory itself had become a liability. On the 7th-day memorial, on the 100-day memorial, each time, the same response. Swift, absolute, silent. No announcement explained why. Time passed, but the security did not ease. Building 18 of the Sunshine Shandong residential complex remained under constant surveillance. Residents whispered about unfamiliar men dressed in black, standing motionless near the gate. They did not speak. They did not interfere. They only watched. And people noticed. In societies where official silence stretches too long, curiosity finds its own roots. One individual, slipping past the perimeter unnoticed, reached the door of apartment 601. It was locked, untouched, but affixed to the surface was a notice that should not have been there. A water bill, still posted, still readable. The numbers were precise, the dates unmistakable. Payment made in early November. Usage steadily recorded through the following 2 months. Approved occupancy, fewer than 5 people. The arithmetic did not add up. For an average household in Beijing, 20 cubic meters of water represents roughly 3 months of normal living. Cooking, bathing, laundry, cleaning, life, but no one was supposed to be there. The registered owner had already relocated. The address was public. The move confirmed, which left only the water behind. Speculation spread quickly. Some asked whether the apartment had ever truly been vacated. Others wondered if the water had been used not for living, but for erasing, washing floors, cleaning walls, removing something that should not remain visible. More unsettling questions followed. What kind of stain demands that much water? And why was it so important that whatever happened behind that door never be remembered? The water has no voice. It cannot testify. It cannot accuse. But it leaves a record. And records, once noticed, refuse to disappear. Because whatever happened inside apartment 601 was never meant to be seen. If this story resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel so that our future investigations can continue to illuminate the truths that often remain hidden behind the entertainment industry's brightest lights. Share this video across every platform where voices gather, because collective awareness is the only force capable of demanding accountability. Let us stand together, not in anger, but in clarity and compassion, to ensure that what happened to Yu Menglong is never repeated. Let us raise our voices so that silence can no longer swallow the struggles of those who give so much of themselves to the world. If a crime scene disappears quickly enough, it begins to resemble a rumor rather than a fact. Apartment 601 was not treated as a place where a man had died. It was treated as a location that needed to be neutralized, secured, sanitized, forgotten. The language used around it was administrative, not human. There were no public statements about an investigation, no visible forensic process, no acknowledgement that something irreversible had occurred inside those walls. Only control. The removal of flowers and candles was not an isolated act. It was systematic. Each offering was cleared away with the same efficiency. No item was left behind long enough to gather dust. Mourning, it seemed, was permitted only briefly, and only if it did not linger. In this context, grief became an inconvenience. Memory became a risk. When people asked why, there was no response. Silence, in cases like this, does not indicate uncertainty. It indicates confidence. Confidence that no explanation is required. The building itself reflected this posture. Access points were monitored. Movement was observed. Residents learned quickly which questions were safe to ask and which were not. Conversations shifted indoors. Voices lowered. Curiosity did not vanish, but it learned how to hide. And yet, certain details resisted containment. Water usage is recorded automatically. It does not care about narratives or public relations. It logs consumption with mechanical indifference. Dates, volumes, patterns. In this case, those patterns refuse to align with the official story. An empty apartment does not use water consistently. Pipes do not bathe. Walls do not launder themselves. Floors do not require repeated washing unless something has marked them. Something persistent. Something unwanted. 20 cubic meters over 2 months suggests routine activity. Repetition. Presence. It suggests that someone was there long enough to need water, not once, but again and again. Authorities did not address this discrepancy. The bill was removed. The door remained sealed. No clarification followed. In environments where transparency is absent, interpretation becomes inevitable. Some observers pointed out that water is commonly used in large quantities for cleaning after traumatic events. Others noted that the number far exceeded what would be required for basic maintenance. More extreme voices suggested rituals, symbolic purification, or attempts to erase not only physical traces, but meaning itself. There is no evidence to support such claims. But there is also no evidence to refute the central fact. The water was used. What makes this detail particularly unsettling is not the speculation it inspires, but the reaction it provoked. Rather than clarifying, the response was to suppress visibility, to remove the record from sight, to ensure that the question did not spread faster than it already had. This approach reveals something critical. When an institution believes it can afford silence, it usually means the cost of speaking is higher. Apartment 601 became a controlled void, a place acknowledged only through absence. No photographs, no official timeline, no public accounting of events. Only the water bill briefly surfaced, like a fragment of a document that escaped destruction by chance rather than permission. And once noticed, it could not be unseen. Water does not erase truth. It preserves questions. Before he became a name spoken in whispers, Yu Menglong was largely invisible, not in the sense of obscurity, but in the way certain people move through the world without drawing attention to themselves. He did not cultivate scandal. He did not weaponize sympathy. His public image, such as it was, remained restrained, almost deliberately muted. That restraint would later become a point of contrast, too sharp to ignore. For 3 years, Yu Menglong lived far from cameras and audiences. While his career in entertainment stalled under informal restrictions, he traveled to remote mountain regions, places rarely mentioned in headlines and never featured in promotional campaigns. There, he taught, not as a visiting celebrity, but as a substitute teacher, an assistant, sometimes simply as an extra pair of hands. Children in those villages did not call him a star. They called him older brother teacher. The title was informal, but it carried weight. It suggested presence. Consistency. Someone who stayed long enough to be remembered, not for who he was, but for what he did. Accounts from local residents describe small, repetitive acts. Walking a student home each night because the road was dark. Dividing a modest monthly salary into portions, most of which never remained with him. One share for tuition, one for notebooks and supplies, one for survival. When he left, he accepted no ceremony. The children offered him walnuts they had saved over half a year. He accepted them quietly. Later, they found an envelope hidden in a desk drawer. Thick, heavy, filled with cash he never mentioned. These details did not surface immediately. They emerged gradually, as people who had once remained silent realized that silence no longer protected anything. The stories spread not because they were dramatic, but because they were consistent. Each retelling reinforced the same image. A man who gave until there was little left to give. His pattern of donation extended far beyond those 3 years. Records indicate that as early as 19 years old, he began contributing to disaster relief. During a severe snowstorm that struck Hunan province, He reportedly donated nearly all the money he had at the time. Less than 400 yuan remained. Friends questioned his judgment. He did not argue. He simply stated that lacking money would not kill him. Others, he believed, were not so fortunate. Over time, his cumulative donations reached approximately 2.5 million yuan. The number itself is significant, but the implications are more revealing. It represents trips never taken, comfort deferred indefinitely, a life organized around restraint rather than accumulation. In narratives of suspicious deaths, character is often invoked selectively, used to either sanctify or condemn. Here, the problem is different. Yu Menglong's documented behavior does not complicate the story. It intensifies it. A person capable of such sustained sacrifice does not fit easily into narratives of recklessness or despair. His actions suggest planning, responsibility, a future orientation. These qualities do not align comfortably with ambiguity, which raises an unavoidable tension. When someone whose life demonstrates consistent concern for others dies under unexplained circumstances, the absence of clarity becomes louder than any accusation. The silence surrounding his death does not neutralize his legacy. It sharpens it. In this context, the water bill becomes more than a technical anomaly. It becomes an insult, a mechanical contradiction to a human story that resists erasure. The more that silence surrounds the circumstances of his death, the more weight his life carries in opposition. Some lives end quietly. Others end because they refuse to. There was no courtroom. There was no announcement. There was no sentence read aloud. And yet, consequences began to arrive. They did not come through formal indictments or public accusations. They came quietly, through closed doors, severed ties, and sudden disappearances from platforms that had once offered unquestioned visibility. For those watching closely, the pattern was unmistakable. Xiang Qingzeng was among the first to experience this shift. Publicly, his situation appeared unrelated. He announced plans to sponsor and personally fund an academic essay competition at his former school, Yunyang High School. On the surface, it was a gesture that aligned neatly with the image of a successful alumnus giving back. Such initiatives are typically welcomed, celebrated even. The response, however, was abrupt. The school declined, not diplomatically, not ambiguously. The reply stated that such competitions had been discontinued and that there would be no further contact. The message was brief, but its implication was clear. Whatever status Xiang Qingzeng once held no longer carried weight. Association itself had become undesirable. No explanation followed. In institutional environments, rejection without justification often speaks louder than accusation. It signals an internal calculation, a decision made before questions are asked publicly. Schools do not risk reputational harm lightly. When they do, it suggests that remaining silent is no longer the safer option. At roughly the same time, attention shifted elsewhere. Li Xiang, a figure deeply embedded in China's entertainment and media industry, began to vanish from the digital landscape. Her social media accounts across multiple platforms were simultaneously restricted. Users could no longer follow them. Search results returned placeholders. Names remained, but access was removed. This kind of synchronized restriction is rare. Platforms typically act independently, responding to specific violations or content issues. When bans occur across multiple services at once, it usually indicates coordination beyond routine moderation. No platform issued a statement. No regulatory body provided clarification. The absence of explanation became its own signal. Observers noted secondary details. Account names changed. Contact information appeared altered. A previously public persona retreated behind generic identifiers. None of these actions constituted proof of wrongdoing, but they were not random. They were defensive. Financial records, publicly accessible, added another layer. Companies linked to Li Xiang began to show abnormal statuses. Some were deregistered. Others suspended operations. Investments were withdrawn. Stock prices fluctuated sharply. Mango Media, connected through management and prior affiliations, saw its market value decline by billions of yuan within months. Rumors circulated that financial intervention had occurred behind the scenes, that funds had been deployed to stabilize collapsing confidence. These claims remain unverified. What can be confirmed is the timing. The shifts followed the renewed attention surrounding Yu Menglong's death. This does not establish causation, but in investigative contexts, correlation demands scrutiny, not dismissal. What is striking is not that individuals faced consequences, but that those consequences arrived without formal acknowledgement. No charges were announced, no findings released, no official narrative offered to explain the sudden changes in status. Punishment appeared to precede truth. In systems where legal outcomes are delayed or obscured, social and institutional reactions often fill the vacuum. Access is revoked, partnerships dissolve, visibility disappears. These measures require no verdict, only consensus. And consensus, once reached, does not need to explain itself. For the public, this sequence creates a profound dissonance. If no crime has been established, why the fallout? If wrongdoing exists, why the silence? Each unanswered question deepens the sense that something larger is being managed, not resolved. When consequences arrive without clarity, they do not close a case. They keep it open, because when punishment comes before truth, something deeper is being protected. In the absence of official conclusions, silence begins to function as a substitute for truth. No report has explained why apartment 601 required 20 cubic meters of water. No statement has clarified what occurred inside those walls. No authority has publicly reconstructed the final hours of Yu Menglong's life. Instead, the public has been left with fragments, numbers without narratives, consequences without causes. This is not unusual. In complex cases, especially those involving influence and visibility, resolution does not always arrive through formal channels. It arrives indirectly through restriction rather than revelation, through disappearance rather than disclosure, through the quiet rearrangement of power. What remains constant is the pattern. A sealed apartment, a water bill that contradicts absence, memorials erased, questions unanswered, figures once prominent now withdrawn from view. Individually, none of these elements constitute proof. Collectively, they form an atmosphere. An atmosphere, while intangible, shapes understanding more effectively than statements ever could. Yu Menglong's death did not produce clarity. It produced reactions, defensive ones, coordinated ones, reactions that suggest sensitivity rather than indifference. If nothing of consequence had occurred, there would be little need for such careful management of memory. This is where the public steps in. Denied access to official explanations, observers became archivists. Screenshots replaced reports. Financial records were examined. Platform restrictions were cataloged. In doing so, ordinary citizens assumed the role of investigators, not because they sought spectacle, but because they were denied closure. In systems where transparency is delayed, attention does not dissipate. It concentrates. The most unsettling aspect of this case is not the unanswered questions, but the implication that answers exist somewhere beyond reach. That information has been contained rather than lost. That the truth has been deferred, not dismissed. History shows that silence is rarely permanent. It is a holding pattern. Sometimes it protects institutions. Sometimes it protects individuals. And sometimes it protects narratives that are not yet ready to collapse. But silence carries its own cost. It transforms every anomaly into a signal, every omission into evidence. The water has stopped flowing now. The apartment remains closed. Time moves forward, as it always does. But the record remains. 20 tons of water were used in an apartment that was supposed to be empty. A man known for restraint and sacrifice died without explanation. Those once adjacent to the event experienced sudden reversals, and no one has said why. Until that changes, the case does not end. It waits, because when silence becomes the dominant response, it is no longer neutral. It becomes part of the story. The water has stopped flowing, but the truth has not.